saw a poster one day by the elevators, the student elevators in the hospital.
Yeah.
It said in huge letters, free pizza. And that was the main bit that I saw. And then there was a talk by someone. It started really from that free pizza.
Hi everyone, welcome to Smile with Jamie. This is episode 7. Today I have another special guest and I just could not wait for this day. I've been counting down to this day, this moment, to have Dr. Rhodri Thomas. He is the magician, I call it, of composite resin, and his work is just phenomenal. I don't know how to describe it other than perfection. Yeah, he's an internationally renowned educator and he is the founder of Art of Dentistry Courses. I just can't wait to dive in to hear all about his journey. Yay! Welcome!
That was a really nice introduction.
Oh,
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that you've taken time of your day to join me here.
I'm most just walking my dogs today, so this is all good. We can do a 5-hour podcast if you want.
So let's just dive right into your stories. If you can just share with us what initially drew you to dentistry and specifically what made you passionate about cosmetic dentistry.
So I was born in... No, I'm joking.
Yeah, tell us everything.
I'm a Leo. That's my star sign. No, my plan originally, actually, when I was a lot younger, was I wanted to go into athletics, and I took running really, really seriously. I know you went for a run this morning.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I took that super seriously, and so that was like a potential career option. And then I decided it might not be that predictable. So I thought about becoming a doctor. And then my eldest sister, she's actually a dentist. And she said, you're quite artsy. I think you'd actually prefer dental school. And the chances are no one will die. So that's a plus. Why don't you think about doing dental school? So thanks to her, I actually switched my application. And I just changed the word medicine for dentistry on my application. I really didn't do much else. Then got into dental school. Thought it was a huge mistake for the first 3 years, to be honest. I also considered myself a bit of a Van Wilder figure of partying. I was a big social rep, I considered myself.
Wow.
In the early years of dental school. I didn't take it particularly seriously until I think it was 4th year of dental school. It's 5 years in the UK. And I remember 2 major things happened. One was I saw a poster one day by the elevators, the student elevators in the hospital.
Yeah.
It said in huge letters, free pizza. And that was the main bit that I saw. And then there was a talk by someone. And I lived in a house full of boys. So you can imagine how wonderfully kept that house was. And the feng shui was just fantastic. So I was like, oh, great, there's free pizza. I won't have to cook dinner tonight in our horrific kitchen. So I'll go along to that. I turned up. I still didn't know what the talk was about. I just knew I was going to be able to get free pizza. So I picked up a box of pizza and I sat in the back. I was almost just going to leave straight away. And this guy came in a 3-piece suit. His name was actually Dr. Thomas O'Connor. He started his presentation. He put up a slide and he said, guess where my composites are? And no one knew where they were. And he clicked the next slide and he was actually hiding like 8 of them. I thought it might be one tooth or something, and 8 different teeth were all composites. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's a magician. That's amazing. I'd never seen anything like it up until that point, because this is all pre-social media. It was the first time I saw anything aesthetic. That kind of changed everything, because I was like, that's the first thing I've seen that was actually mildly artistic. I had amazing art teachers when I was a teenager called John and Sue. They're now my patients.
Wow.
And they were super encouraging. And then it just kind of reminded me of being back in the classroom with John and Sue, and I really wanted to do what he could do, so I stayed in touch with him. And then the obsession kind of started. I went online and read every paper and watched every video I could about composites, and came across legends like Newton Farl and Buddy Mopper and Didier Dici, and I would read everything I could about theirs, and I bought books about it. It started really from that free pizza. And of all the things I did in dental school, I enjoyed nothing more than waxing up teeth. I thought everything else was a waste of time, to be honest. But waxing up teeth, I was like, this is miniature sculpture. This is so much fun. Yeah, I just kind of kept going with it. And I became probably unhealthily obsessed, I would say, in the early years with composites. But then it was photography, then it was ceramics. And then it all just became about trying to recreate nature as much as possible to trick other dentists. That was what started to give me a bit of joy, you know.
Wow.
Tricking patients is easy. I think tricking dentists is more fun.
Oh yeah, that's next level. Like I don't even know. Your work is just perfect. I can't even
Oh,
describe other than that word. Incredible. And I was wondering because I know you do like all these paintings. Did you grow up wanting to be an artist or at all? Like was it kind of a side hobby?
no, I'd still love to be an artist, actually. If someone would pay me, I would totally do that. What actually happened was I never took art seriously from entering elementary school. For me, it was just a time to mess around for an hour or something. And I got into secondary school, so like your high school, I guess. The first year I didn't have a very good teacher, so I didn't take it seriously at all. And then I met John and Sue when I was about 12, 13 years old. They were just super inspiring. You know, there's sometimes you have teachers, everyone can probably think of at least one teacher that was really inspiring.
Yeah.
And for me, it was those guys. They gave me a lot of self-belief. For some reason, they thought there was some talent there, which I didn't think necessarily there was. But they made it so kind of fun and enjoyable. We go on art trips, and you can choose art as like an optional subject in your last kind of couple years of high school. And I never would have thought that I would have done that when I was younger. And I ended up doing that as one of my last kind of 4 subjects that I chose. If it wasn't quite so high risk, you know, I'd love the life of being a dentist. So there's a studio just out there, actually, just outside the window. So I've got a little home studio where I try to paint like once a week if I can, or every 2 weeks. And they encouraged me to start kind of selling paintings and doing more and more paintings, and show me artists they thought, you know, I'd really like and could influence me. And yeah, they were just rock and roll. You'll see them all the time. We have dinner sometimes and stuff. It's great.
And I'm sure that artistic ability came really, really useful in dentistry.
I think, and this often comes up, it comes up on courses as well. You know, people ask if I can't like draw or I have no artistic skill, could I ever be good at composites? If I was to give like an answer on that, you know, you could Google, I think I show this on the Art of Resin course, you can show people that take drawing classes for 2 weeks or a month or a couple months, and it will show their before and afters, you know, and these people have, to be brutally honest, no skill at all. And the dramatic improvement that is possible just by learning basics like proportions and line angles and light and color, they look like trained artists just after a couple weeks. So the same goes with composites, is even if you feel like you have no raw talent at all, it might take you a couple more times to practice something, a couple more times to kind of really see the details. But I think anyone can make anything look really special if you already have a bit of a knack for seeing color or seeing little micro shapes. Probably have a head start. But the biggest factor I've now seen looking back isn't whether you have that head start or not. It comes down purely to dedication, I would say. So like you could have a head start and start here, but if you just rely on that kind of natural talent, it'll only kind of take you so far. You could start with almost no skill and just be wildly dedicated, and you'll eventually be able to overtake people. I think it just depends how much effort you want to put in, how much you love it, really. That's what I think. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
I feel like your talent is
I'm going to pass it on to my mother. She'll love that line.
when I see your work, I'm like, that's because it's Dr. Rhodri Thomas.
But there's plenty of things I've done wrong or mistakes or missteps and things I have to correct. And, you know, no one always gets it right every time. There's always, in anyone's best case, you know, anyone that lectures or anything like that, there's always a touch of luck involved as well. Like right time, right place, a bit like athletes. They can't win every single game. There will always be times where they just play like pretty well, and sometimes they'll be lucky and they'll be in really good form that day, and you never know quite what it was, but the case goes a little bit better. Really, you want to have as many of those days as possible, but you can't always achieve that.
So ever since that free pizza event and your obsession for composite grew, and you just kept reading and digging and crafting your skills, were there any moments where you were like, I don't want to do this anymore?
Yeah, no, there totally were. There were moments maybe not related to like the act of doing it itself, but there were definitely times in the early years where, you know, I put a lot of work into certain projects. Being diplomatic right now. Put in a lot of work into certain projects that took up a year or two of my time. Some of those didn't turn out particularly well. People working with kind of ended up taking a lot of it, and I never got it back. And there was a brief period, maybe around 2016, 17, where I was considering maybe choosing a different career, to be honest. I felt like I put in so much work, and I was like, I've lost it all now, so maybe I'll just do something else, and dentistry isn't for me. But then I changed my mind eventually after reconsidering my choices. So it wasn't always like a nice kind of uphill, gentle journey.
Yeah.
There were definitely points that I would say I was overly trusting of other people, and I learned some lessons along the way.
You look so young, but like I'm sure you get that comment a lot, but how
I
long have you
appreciate it.
been practicing?
I graduated in 2014. September of 2014, I graduated. My mum was a teacher and a principal.
Yeah.
I saw what she did and I thought it was so fun. I used to watch her in the classroom with students and stuff. First year where you graduate in the UK, you kind of have these little mini lectures. You're in like groups of 20 spread around the country. I used to really want to be one of those people up at the front that was kind of sharing and helping the other dentists. So even though I graduated in 2014, I'd already had made lectures for fun at that point, you know? So before anyone asked me, I was making lectures for fun on weekends and evenings because I was like, one day someone's going to ask me and I'm going to be so prepared. And it would be really awkward if no one ever asked me, to be honest. But thankfully someone did. His name is Brian Weber, an absolute legend. He asked me to come back and kind of share my thoughts with the new students that were coming in that had just graduated.
Yeah.
That kind of led everything to kind of snowball. It was probably like 2015 that I started sharing things, and there were good and bad things about that. A lot of older, specifically male dentists, I would say, did not take to that very well, which I can understand to a degree, but I wasn't sharing anything wildly complicated at that point in time. But I just kind of kept doing it and ignored all of them, and you know, that was almost 10 years ago now.
Wow, that's very unique that you were preparing.
I really was preparing a lot. I made 10 different lectures actually, which were all on different things. Like one was on photography, one on ceramics, one on specific type of veneers, and you know, 2 or 3 were probably on composites or something. I was just waiting for like a chance for someone to want to see it, basically. And looking back, it was very amateur to not very impressive. But to me at the time, I thought it was cool.
And that was even before you graduated dental school.
Yeah, probably in the last kind of few months of my 5th year, my last year, I was starting to put stuff together. And then as soon as I started seeing patients, I was taking photos of everything. And so very quickly by that first Christmas, I already had, you know, quite a few lectures that I've made.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Yeah.
what ignited that? Like, what made you want to prepare those lectures and have that kind of dream, quote unquote?
Because I kind of coasted in those first couple of years of dental school. I'd built up a little energy reserve, I like to think. That we were all, it wasn't like secondary school, like you were all going to graduate on a very even playing field, you know? So I was trying to find ways to stand out. So in my last year of dental school, I was applying for any extra student award that you could do in the UK. The lectures kind of came around, I guess, from having that little obsession with composite initially. I was just documenting everything and trying to learn how to do each stage a bit better, like self-learning. And then I realized there were a few like helpful things that I found that I could put into Keynote or a PowerPoint. And then I really did want to be like one of those people that was sharing with the other dentists. Not to be on stage or anything like that. Like it wasn't in that way. I just wanted to share things that I found out with other people so that they could do them too. Yeah, I guess it kind of started from there.
You make it sound so easy though. Yeah,
Well,
I just did it. It just
I think I was thinking about earlier about I gave this lecture thanks to Dr. Andi Miro in about 2015. She invited me to NYU to talk to the students. And I was thinking back to some of the stuff I said in that lecture. It was probably still my favorite talk I've ever given, to be honest. And I think there were like 3 things in the kind of recipe. It was like working hard, having direction, and taking action. And I'd say the last was the most important one, actually. The working hard bit, people kind of sometimes overlook, but dentists are pretty used to kind of working hard. So there's just like an element of I sacrificed a lot of weekends and evenings. Crazy stuff, you know, I'd finish work at 5, come home, have dinner, work until 1 or 2 a.m. on stuff on my laptop, go to bed, wake up, go to work. And those were in the busy days where I was treating between 50 and 70 people a day, doing crazy stuff. The direction was hard because that still always changes, but I kind of knew vaguely I wanted to kind of be one of those people that was sharing stuff one day. I could kind of imagine in my mind if I backtracked their career, how they went. And at some point they had to make some lectures. So I thought, let's do some of that, which meant I had to take photos of everything. And then the biggest one I would say is taking action. So a lot of people will think about it for a while or think about what they want to do or maybe coast out in those first early years after dental school because maybe you're tired from dental school. It's not an easy time. And then your first job can be quite stressful and you're just learning how to kind of cope with everything else. And these days you're comparing yourself with people on social media, which sometimes means you just kind of stutter the first few years and actually think you're doing stuff, but you're not kind of wildly doing stuff. Like a good example, and I talk to other people that run courses about this, is I always say at the end of my course, if you have any case you want to send me, I will take you through it and I will plan it for you, and I'll do the shade matching and all those kind of things. I'll help you with that case. I'd say one person every 2 or 3 courses will ever take that offer up, which is fine because I wouldn't have time if everyone said yes, but I know only at least one person at most will actually do that in the room. But it's those kind of moments of taking action that were really important in the early years. I did so much crazy stuff in the early years.
Can you give me like 1 or 2 examples of those crazy stuff?
I can give you one of my favorite ones.
One.
So first year, so I graduated in September 2014. I was taking my parents to New York December of 2014. So a couple months out of dental school. Just to say thank you for being cool parents, and also favorite child. And so I was bored one day at work. There was a cancelled molar root filling, so I had about an hour spare. And everyone knows him now, but I came across Dr. Apper's profile on Instagram. This was just when it was becoming a thing, like 2014. Hardly anyone was on there at that point, especially for dentistry. And I thought what I was seeing was interesting, so I kind of Googled who this person was. And I sent a message to the clinic through that online form, and I said, I'm not a patient, I'm a dentist. I would love to spend 30 minutes in your office. I've just graduated, I'm going to be here on these dates. And long story short, eventually they said yes. He didn't know I was coming. Graduating from a very tragic dental school in Wales, because there's only one, it's Cardiff. Everyone is pretty much encouraged to stay on the government health system for a good while when you graduate over here, which I disagree with, but that's another story. I suddenly was in New York in this office watching just dentistry I didn't even know existed. I had no idea that this kind of stuff could happen. And I ended up spending that whole day with them. I met Andy that day, and that has a huge influence on my career. And now we run courses together, things and talks with Dr. Apper and Dr. Rosenthal and the guys in Dubai, because from New York, then I went over to Dubai. My whole career could have taken all sorts of paths just because of a cancelled molar root filling. And I could have just sat there on my phone and not done anything. But I sent that email to that practice. So that's a good example, I would say, of taking action.
Wow.
Because it changed everything.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about if you had a pivotal moment, and I feel like that is pretty significant turning moment for you. You would say that?
I think, yeah, for sure. And there were a few little things like that, but I remember that being really special. Probably more than maybe even Dr. Apper knows to this day, actually, because it just opened my eyes to different possibilities. I'd been told the whole way through dental school to basically your equivalent would be do insurance-based dentistry only to a kind of mediocre standard, because that's what you're hindered to, I guess, our kind of government system over here. And people were kind of willing to accept that, and a lot of people do to do that for multiple reasons, and I can understand some of them, but not all of them. I always wanted to do dentistry a little bit differently, and then seeing everything that they could do over there, I was like, yeah, no, I think I need to do it.
And then you brought that back home. You didn't think about moving to America. What was that process like?
No, I did. I almost moved to America, actually. That almost happened. I kept that bit out of the story, but I did almost kind of move over there. But I am super close to my family, and I love the countryside. I was happy to stick around. Pros and cons to everything, really.
I think you've mentioned this at the course, when you were talking about your career a little bit. Do you have your practice, or do you work as an associate or partner?
Yeah, so just an associate, not even a partner, just an associate.
You've decided to just specialize in cosmetics from the beginning, or was that something that gradually turned into it?
I mean, I could see what other people were doing who I kind of wanted to emulate, and I could see that they were only doing these kind of cases and they weren't doing root canals or that many extractions and stuff like that. So the first kind of proper practice that I went into, where I was there for probably about 7-8 years, was quite a tragic setup, to be honest. But I went in as an associate, taking over from 2 very, very much older dentists that had found some very innovative ways of using GIC, shall we say. That practice completely did a 180 shift. I like to think that I was as influential as an associate can be. Yeah, it gives you nice kind of flexibility, but the way I was managed to kind of bring things in there, specialists and stuff like that for the practice, meant that I could free myself up to focus on those cosmetic things. So kind of turning that ship probably took a good year or two, but then eventually I could say, let's send the root canals this way, let's send the surgery stuff this way, and I could then focus on just doing the bits I wanted, which I'm aware most people listening are probably in that position right now. They're associates in a practice, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Maybe not
could
all of
be.
them.
Yeah.
If you're a practice owner, you can kind of change anything quite relatively easily. But as an associate, it's quite hard to have an influence sometimes. You have to show initially your worth, and then you can come in with some ideas, and some people will listen, some people won't. I was met with a lot of resistance, but eventually if one or two of your ideas will work, they might start listening a little bit more, and you can actually have a really big effect, I think, even as an associate, on how your career turns out and how your practice is run.
That's incredible. I think as an associate, like you said, there is definitely that element of restriction as to how much you can change things. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love that you just kind of took that initiative and try to find your way into it.
Maybe I'm biased. I think you can be hugely influential. You can take a non-successful practice, and just as an associate, you can make it super successful. It's easier if you own the place, for sure. But if you're willing enough, I mean, the downside is you don't have any overall reward in their success, in that, they might go on to be a super high earning practice because of things that you might influence them to do. But your main reward will be your time is then how you want it to be, and I'm sure you will earn more, but you won't have a slice of the bigger pie.
Do you have any plans to have your own thing?
Yeah, maybe one day.
Maybe
If
one
the
day.
if the time is right, it would be nice. It's always nice to do things your own way. I think right now the courses probably get in the way of running a practice particularly well. But I'd be open to it. If the right opportunity came along one day, I'd be up for it.
And you kind of touched on how you met Dr. Andi. I want to meet her. I will meet her one day. How did that come about? Doing Art of Ceramics together, you founded Art of Dentistry and teaching. You touched on it, like, you kind of prepared yourself, like lecturing was a big part of your journey in the beginning. How did that come into life?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the thing I told you about making lectures for my own enjoyment and stuff, I've only met, yeah, I know, super sad. I've only met one other person that did that, and that was Andy, Dr. Miro.
Oh my God.
She actually did the same thing. So the day we met was when I was shadowing that one Christmas in New York, and we just walked past each other in the corridor. She was actually shadowing that day. I thought she was already working there, and I was like, how is this girl who's so young working in this boss practice right now? And I was like, she's got to be amazing. But then maybe we felt like a little bit of competition between each other or something. I'm not sure. So we didn't get to talk that much that day, but we added each other as friends on Instagram. Classic. And then we just kind of messaged a little bit over the years, and I could see what she was doing, she could see what I was doing, and then she very kindly offered me to come to NYU and talk to the students, which was amazing. That opened a lot of doors. And then we just kept staying in touch, and I was doing initially the resin course, and I had Art of Dentistry. I'd kind of been reborn at that point. And Andy had made Strive as well, which is kind of her version of the dental education. And I think we were probably chatting most likely over a drink one night out about something. Doing a course together probably came up.
Yeah.
We probably mentioned it a few times, then eventually we were like, we should just do it. So the first time we actually gave the course, we didn't do a practice run or anything like that. I had some lectures slides and she had some lecture slides, and we just put them into one presentation literally just before the course. And then we ran it, and now we perfected it, and now it's a pretty well-oiled machine, and runs all over.
Oh wow, that's so cool to hear that, how that friendship came about.
For sure, she's been super kind and generous throughout the whole time. Sometimes it's tough to teach with other people. It's tough to work with other people. I've definitely made some misjudgments in the past, but I'd say we're going
Probably
good.
both ways.
Yeah. pretty good fun teaching with someone else as well.
I know every practicing dentist have their philosophy in how they practice and what guides them in their practice. What is yours when it comes to cosmetic dentistry, and how has that influenced your approach in treatments? I know you do both porcelain veneers and composite veneers. Is there one that you prefer, or is there one that you had to say no to? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Big question, Jamie.
I
Big
know.
question. I'm gonna start, and then you can lead me like a
Yeah.
Sherpa wherever you would like.
Yeah.
Okay. So philosophy-wise, if I had like a motto to how I see dentistry, is creating beauty by recreating nature. I love to make things as hyper-natural as possible, and a lot of that just comes with really looking into all the details of teeth. You can think teeth are just teeth, or you can think they're just one shade or something like that, but they're so much more. When you actually think about them as structures, all these layers that build up on top of each other of different colors and chroma and translucencies and the opalescent effects and all those things in such a small space as well, is such a hard thing to recreate very well, but it makes it so fulfilling if you can kind of get close, you know. And I think striving to get as close as possible is actually where all the fulfillment comes from. Even if you don't quite get it to truly recreate nature, that's so much more fun than, you know, just using your thumb and squashing something on and making it rectangular. Although I am biased. I do the resin, the ceramics, you know, kind of, I used to do a lot of dentures as well. And obviously when it comes to things that involve a technician or a ceramist, they deserve 99% of the credit, you know, because they're the ones in control of that artwork. You know, we're giving them the shape and maybe some of the designs and the temporaries and little nuances because we're in that patient's mouth, but the actual artwork is coming from them. Whereas in resin, and one of the reasons why I love it so much, is we're fully in control of that destiny. You know, we're not relying on an outside source. There's nothing more relaxing to me than doing a resin case, because I know whatever happens in that hour or 2 or 3 hour appointment, that nothing can happen that could go wrong. Because there's always a way to fix something, there's always a recipe, and there's always a path to make something look supernatural. Whereas, you know, if you did a ceramics case, you're maybe worried those 2-3 weeks waiting for those veneers to come back. You see them on the model, maybe they look a little bit weird, you put them in the mouth, and you never know quite how it's going to go. Obviously, you can get pretty good at that as well, but with resin, it's all on us. And I love being in control of all of those different elements and building those little layers up together and finding new materials that can do new things. And I just find it super fulfilling. There's this book I mentioned in the course quite a lot, Why We Make Things and Why It Matters, by Peter Korn, master woods craftsman. And I love how much he talks about kind of using your hands and your mind together as a well fine-tuned instrument, and how he gets fulfillment out of that in his practice. And when I was reading that, I was like, that's just like dentistry, at least for me anyway. You just got to go in and create these transient pieces of artwork, essentially, that someone's going to wear for hopefully a couple decades. And so we're just kind of doing this miniature artistic work for people. It can have a huge influence on them as well. You know, I'm sure his wardrobes and cabinets have a big influence on people's lives, but you know, when we're affecting someone's smile, we're probably being even more influential. It's the blueprint of a very fulfilling job if you can carve it to be that way. Was that inspiring? I hope that was inspiring.
Yeah, no, I think it's very heavy as a younger dentist to want to get to that place of you saying like, I feel relaxed using resin in my hands, and that level of confidence to deliver that to the patient. Because sometimes you do want to hide behind that work of the ceramist.
Yes, I'm well aware.
It's a craft that requires lots of hours of practice to get to where we can get to that place. Although I do feel like very inspired, but at the same time, like I feel like Dr. Rhodri, he can say that because it's him. And I'm sure there are many of other young dentists out there who may feel like how I feel.
When it comes to resin, I love doing the layering and affecting the colors and things like that, but the real secret isn't really in that. You know, people get very obsessed with what composite systems different educators use and stuff like that. That's probably the least important factor of all. And they get very obsessed with the the colors as well, but it's honestly shapes. If you can truly get very good at wax ups and morphology, which is a very easy thing to practice in your own time, or even cancelled appointments and get a little bit of wax and carve it on a old stone model or something like that. I see it time and time again on the courses. The ones that excel are the ones that have looked at teeth just 10% more than the average dentist. You know, we have so many opportunities in checkups and consults to study people's teeth, and we're surrounded by tooth models all the time in our job. It still amazes me how many years people can go through their career and not know some of the elements of shapes of even just a central incisor. So it doesn't take years and years of practice to just get good at shaping and understanding shapes and the different little variations that can happen in especially in anterior teeth. That's something that anyone can get pretty proficient at, and that will change all of your composites. And only then, you know, you can start worrying a little bit more about layering and adding in some sexy details, as I like to call them. The best cases are always the ones that have the best shapes.
Wow.
Oh,
Do you still do dentures and porcelain veneers, like all of those?
I actually used to do probably like only 20% composite, to be honest. And it was like 80% other things, dentures and ceramics and rehabs and stuff like that. I'm aware of how my social media comes across. People think that I probably just do composite resin. I don't. I'd say now it's probably kind of half and half, but initially it was probably 70% of what I did. Then it went down to about 20%. And now it's probably back to about 50-50. So I do enjoy it the most, I would say. But
So was there any case that you would say no to composite versus porcelain? If you had a patient who came in and they were like, I want composite veneers, but then and you love doing composite veneers.
Yes.
But you would say no. Like, were there any cases like that?
Yeah, so I always think in a consult, for me, it's a two-way interview that's happening. When I was starting out, I thought of it as a one-way interview, that they were just judging me. And I would do what the patient wanted, because I wanted to do as much dentistry as possible, which I think is quite normal when people first graduate. But you've got to realize they're the professionals. And really, it's a two-way thing. I'm checking them out probably more than they're checking me out. And so if someone has some red flags, even if they want to do composite veneers, there's bits about them that, you know, I don't fully think it will turn out well. I will happily tell them, you know, I'm not the right dentist for you. Sometimes that's the best way to go, but you'll only kind of learn that by making that mistake of taking on cases or people that maybe weren't the easiest to manage. So that might be one scenario where I might not do composites, but sometimes people come in and part of that is they have wild expectations, or they've brought in AI generated photos I've seen before of smiles that they want, you know, maybe some mild body dysmorphia things, and so I might not take them up on that. Or they just have teeth that are not suitable for composite because maybe all of the enamel's been worn away, and I'm just going to be putting composite on dentine, which they might like for a little while, but they won't love me if it ever came off. So, or sometimes patients come in, they think it can go on top of old restorative work very easily. So it'll depend on a few things, just, you know, how their character is, how their teeth are, and a bit of biology along the way. And I'm always very honest with patients. I'll tell them what I think their future looks like if I do their case in composite or in ceramic, because quite a lot of the time, especially when they get into their 30s or 40s, it's kind of both cases would work quite nicely for them. So I try and show them and explain what their future might look like over the next 10, 20 years with whichever one they pick, and then it's up to them which one they prefer the sound of.
So composites don't have to chip all the time. They don't have to discolor all the time.
No, definitely
They can
not.
last long.
Oh yeah, I mean they're often seen in some scenes as a secondary option. But if you were to look at, you know, people with far more experience than myself, you know, Dr. Buddy Mopper has got 40+ year recalls in composite resin, and not just like one or two. We're talking hundreds, thousands of them. 30-year recalls, even more. 20-year recalls, even more. And I've seen them with my own eyes, you know. Composites that last decades. And as long as the right kind of protocols are put in place when you're putting them on, and the right kind of shapes, measurements and things like that, it can be a really predictable and really nice treatment option, you know, where it is purely additive. I love being fully in control, but the other major advantage is we're keeping all that healthy tooth structure underneath quite a lot of the time, at least. It is just such a fun material. Sometimes you might do cases early on and a couple of those might chip, and then you kind of you either lose confidence in the material or just composites in general, just the whole process. And then people start leaning heavily on ceramics. But quite often what happens is, a little bit later in their career, they might start coming back towards resin again, but I think it's often a great first option for people, and not for everyone.
Do you think it's the understanding of occlusion that's changing them to come back to resin? What do you think is the one that brings people back?
Maybe they've seen their ceramic, last for quite a few years at that point, so they're kind of confident in their own dentistry, and they think if those ceramic shapes are working, maybe I can do it in resin again. But I'm not entirely sure it brings them back. I mean, this comes a point where if you do one thing in dentistry like enough, you might tire of it slightly and want to expand to another region, So whether that is doing a lot of resin and wanting to try out ceramic, or doing a lot of ceramic and maybe wanting to try out a bit of resin, or that AACD accreditation process, you kind of have to do both, and you have to be pretty good at both as well.
And you did that process, accreditation?
Oh, I never did it. No, I never did any accreditation with any organization.
No.
But not that I'm against it, but I think it's a great thing for people to go through.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, if they have the time and the determination.
Yeah. I did not know that composite veneers can last long and all that until like recently, and your course is like my first composite bonding course ever, and
that's a good one to kick off with. Intense,
I started out strong, and it really ignited the artist in me, the creativity that was inside of me, because I've always wanted to be an artist as a kid, or like interior design, something like that. Yeah, just finding my passion for cosmetics kind of came about around that time, and I took your course, and I was just like, this is what I want to do.
Oh, that's awesome.
Started to do a couple pec laterals and front couple teeth and things like that. Yeah, like chipping, they happen. And I'm like, my confidence is just like, do I really want to do this?
I mean, I'm so glad that I'll come on to chipping. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the course and you found it a little bit inspiring. I remember you sat in the front row right in front of my desk as well. So you're in the hot seat. You were, but I love that. I love people that sit in the front row. I think that's always a great choice. But on courses, you kind of do want that element. There's one side of teaching a process and some logical steps to follow. I think that is part of sharing and educating, but there's a much bigger part is trying to get people like creatively inspired or artistically inspired, because that will probably give them much longer kind of drive and determination to do stuff, rather than just telling them do these steps. I try and get that across as much as possible on that resin course in just kind of 2 days, I guess.
Yeah.
But when it comes to chipping, I'm sure everyone has experienced something like that in their careers. A few factors can obviously come into it, but there's one thing you can do that will take a little bit of stress away from you mentally, I think. So some of the more obvious factors might be involved in the bonding protocols and making that surface is really perfect before we do our etching and our bonding, and then just placing the composite itself in a correct manner with the correct kind of shapes that might involve the envelope of function, and shallowing that out and having the right kind of thickness, especially on that incisal edge. Thinking a little bit about excursions and protrusive movements and stuff like that, but nothing too heavy, honestly. It really doesn't have to be that you have to master Dawson's entire book on occlusion. Little bits and principles in there that you can use quite easily that will work well. And then having patients do the right kind of protocols afterwards and make them a little night guard or retainer or something that you should do. But then I will always tell patients, and it gets a bit easier when you've seen your recalls, come up to that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, now 10-year mark, that your confidence will grow naturally. And I understand those first few years, if they ask how long it lasts, you just have to go by what other dentists say. But you haven't done a case that lasts 10 years, You can start eventually saying to people like, well, I know my work can last this many years and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. The only single thing that's going to change in this room is you, the patient. So if you follow my instructions, do you look after them, then I'm sure we're not going to have any problems. But if you decide to not follow the instructions and maybe not come for checkups, hygienists, wear your night guard, things like that, change your lifestyle in some poor way, then you're the only one responsible for the outcome of this. You're the biggest thing that changes. Then you can sleep a little bit easier at night. So if they come back, let's say 3 years down the line, something's chipped, it should be that they understand that maybe they'll even apologize to you because they realize you spent a couple of hours creating that miniature artwork and they haven't followed all the things that you said. They haven't looked after it. They should never come back in a state where they're angry or annoyed at you, or that you feel overly stressed about it, because that makes dentistry not fun. You really got to set yourself up for success in those consults and all those little moments you have with the patient. until they're free.
Yeah, that's really good. With your training and getting to where you are, did you take a lot of did you learn a lot from reading rather than I don't think there were a lot of CEs 10 years ago. Who were your mentors?
That's a good question, Jamie. Very good question. I didn't take CE actually. I wish there
Wow.
had been a mentor in those early years. I definitely messaged a lot of people and asked, "What do you think of this?" or "What camera do you use?" or anything like that. And I don't remember anyone being particularly helpful. I remember a lot of people being not very helpful. So I took it upon myself to self-teach everything. But there's plenty of books you can buy and plenty of information and papers and things you can read and journals you can pay for access to.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of it just through self-teaching and
Yeah.
practice myself,
Wow.
honestly. Not that I'm saying that's the best way to go, but I was quite isolated in the countryside in Wales. We're not surrounded by people that you can kind of go to and lean on. But there were definitely times where I got to shadow amazing clinicians. Even if they weren't people that did resin, there was definitely a great use in being around people that were doing, I think, amazing things in dentistry. There was a little bit of it when I came through that, but I would have loved to have a principal or someone in the office or someone nearby, then cases too, and get critiques.
Well, nowadays there's so many courses like Art of Resin, Art of
There are.
Ceramics. That's really amazing that you're teaching what you've mastered to other dentists.
You can always be better though. There'll always be things to do better. In any case that I do, there'll always be something I can pick in it that, I could have just done that, or I could have done this bit just slightly differently.
Yeah.
No one will ever do the perfect case. I look at some dentists, I think their work is pretty perfect. Tony Rotondo is one that comes to mind. He's an Australian prosthodontist. I think he sets the bar extremely high, but I love being able to see people's work like that and strive to get cases that can emulate it in some way. And I think a lot of the times now with social media, younger dentists will see cases and they'll think that case is really nice. And I don't know if my dentistry looks like that or I can do it that way. But I think a better way to look at it is just another human has done that case. We all have the same tools, materials. How cool would it be if I could do it like that? And I kind of always saw it more as a challenge or something to kind of strive towards than I'll never be able to do it mentality, I guess. A lot of the time, people are set up for perfect photographs and you're seeing their immediate post-ops and you're not seeing a 10-year recall and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of reading between the lines, I guess, on social media is full of things like that these days.
That's good. That's a good message to other young dentists. I don't know if it's a big question or not, but in your opinion, what makes a good cosmetic dentist?
Oh, that could be a big question. When it comes down to cosmetics or aesthetics, it's kind of in the business of beauty, I guess.
Yeah,
in terms of it can be what's beautiful to us as the dentist or what's beautiful to the patient. What you want is to have this relationship where you're kind of seeing the same vision or the same path. As one of you is wildly off, then it's not going to work. And I think eventually you'll all develop your own kind of styles as well. And patients will seek out a certain style and dentists will start to develop a certain aesthetic because everyone has their own aesthetic. You can even see it online. You can see the way people photograph or the way they use their shapes and stuff.
Yeah.
You can almost see like a trend in someone's work. But if you can have the dentist and the patient kind of aligned on that, then you're basically in charge of creating, like I said before, these transient bits of artwork. And just like buying artwork you put on your walls and stuff like that, you gotta love it and love it for a long time. If you can understand how to speak with a patient in ways that they'll understand and communicate your vision, but also understand their vision, which is hard to do, honestly, and you'll get better at it over time, then you can kind of start to put all the pieces together and create something that they really want. Some people want stuff super natural. Some people want it to look like they've had some work done. But I think it's always important to stay within your own kind of personal boundaries of aesthetics as well. So if someone came in and they wanted 12 teeth that were super bleached and no detail and very rectangular shapes and closed up embouchures, even if they might not use those words, but those are the photos they're showing me, I'd be tempted to step away if they weren't open to a little bit of re-education, as I call it, and let them find someone else, because I want our aesthetics to cross over in some kind of way. And it all comes down to communication first and then it's execution.
Yeah, that's good.
That was very rambling and not pre-practiced, so I hope some of that makes sense.
I never really actually asked that question. I think I'm going to start asking that question. I think that was perfect. Understanding, communication.
Dentistry, because you can have amazing clinicians, people that just create the most special work, but maybe they can't communicate that in a consult or during treatment. And you can have people that are have amazing social skills or communication skills, but they can't execute everything that they say they will. And striking a good balance between those two is sometimes hard, but really important.
Yeah.
And I'm probably, in your mind, everyone can think of an example of at least one of those.
How do you make sure the patient understands what you're telling them? Because I found a lot of us, like all of us, we'd like to just hear what we want to hear. And even though you're saying A, B, C, D, E, they just want to focus on C. And then later on, I've told you like A, B, C, D, E, but they're like, no, I didn't hear that.
It is true. I mean, you'll always got to cater for just a couple % of society that will, no matter how good a communicator you are, they have their own problems and dysmorphias that they're dealing with. There's not much you can do to escape that situation. But in general, I guess it would come down to the ways I like to communicate these days is you need to have fantastic photography. Or even if you don't, some kind of photography is better than nothing. But I think fantastic photography helps. Some kind of screen that you can both look at the same time to share things you can see in their mouth on a macro level. And portrait shots and smiling shots. You can obviously use bits of digital design tools these days to get an initial message across, but nothing explains it better than actually having something in their mouth. So this goes for resin and ceramic cases, is whether you prefer doing a direct mock-up in a console, just to show maybe the change to one tooth only. Look what we could do if we just added a bit of length here, or as you get a bit quicker, maybe change 4 teeth or something very quickly with flowable or packable. Or if you're more comfortable working with a ceramist who can do a little wax up and you can bring them back and do a little trial smile. That whole process of pre-visualizing it for them and for yourself is wildly important. In that appointment is when you can really drive home some elements of shapes. You can start discussing colors, but there does always have to be an element of trust, I find, when it comes down to the color especially. And then when they go into their temporaries, if you're doing a ceramics case, that's an even better way to test drive shapes, because then they've worn them, they've had the phonetics tested, and you can use your color of temporaries to test drive colors as well. Certain Lux Temps that will marry up quite well on the Vita Shade Guide. Use that as a little kind of guide, and I like to use examples of other cases or other natural teeth, and I'll discuss things like halos, translucencies. What do you think of this one? What do you think of this one? And I'll explain like maybe more translucency would suit you because you have very long teeth, and we can use that as a tool so they appear a little bit shorter. Or if they have a lot of lip filler, that might make their teeth appear a little shorter. I'll say we don't really want to have too much translucency here because that'll make your teeth look shorter, and you've already achieved that yourself. But we can add some extra kind of brightness. We can boost these up so they're not left in that shadow of your lip, and there's things you can tell them that will gain a bit of rapport and trust, and you're directing along the way before that final ceramic comes back. But you can do similar things in resin as well. You can do just very basic mock-ups, and you can do a quick mock-up to really show that color to a patient. Not rush them through it, but let them kind of stand up in the mirror, go over to the window and check it out before you do it. I think the longer I've done this, the more and more I've actually spent time on those steps of truly making sure they understand what's coming. Because it's when that area breaks down a little bit that you can get into like stressful experiences in dentistry.
Yeah, that's so true. Those are really important pearls that you just shared. So thank you so much. And I know you've developed some dental products. I remember the trans opalescent. Was that one?
Yeah, Flowable Opal. That's the one.
Flowable Opal. And do you do research, or like how does that come about? Like, do you just tell the company like we need this?
Well, Cosmedent have been an amazing company to work with. I've worked with a few different companies over the years. No one's been more straightforward and generous and kind, I would say, in terms of a dental company than Cosmedent. It's a real kind of family company, and they really want to make the best materials and special materials. It's actually funny, as a dental student, quick side story, I saw that talk with the free pizza, and then I went home that night and I found the Cosmedent YouTube channel, which still exists. There's a Cosmedent YouTube channel, and I would watch their videos on loop. Buddy Mopper, Newton Fall, I watched them on loop over and over again. I'd see like how they were moving the flat plastics, and I was like, Cosmedent is in America. They must have amazing materials. These cases look amazing. And I thought just one day, if I had a compule or a syringe of like re-enamel from Cosmedent, I was like, I would have made it as a dentist. If I can just get hold of some of the stuff from America. Because you got to remember, I'm in the middle of nowhere in Wales. And so for me, that was an unrealistic dream.
Wow.
And so going from watching Dr. Buddy Mopper do all those things to eventually meeting him one day at AACD and then getting to work with them and then getting them to say, if you ever have any ideas, come to us with them. It is wild to me that as a dental student, I was just watching them on repeat and now I get to go to their center and stuff. That's basically what they said. They were like, if you have any ideas, and I was like, I've actually got a load of ideas. This is this is great that you've offered this up. And I've got more than, people could probably handle, I would say. And so we started with these ones, the Flowable Opal. I just felt there wasn't anything in their system that was easy to use to create an opalescent effect.
Yeah.
And I love having that effect in the incisal third. And so it was probably about an 18-month process of tweaking ingredients and recipes and things until that was made. And then Opalite, which is a packable microfill, even though it has a similar name, is very different. That was kind of, for me, I was trying to create the perfect enamel shade, something that would work very easily for everyone, that wouldn't gray out if you got the thickness a little bit wrong. It would kind of maintain its value and maybe have a touch of opalescence in there as well. And then it's got all the beauty of a microfill. So it was a really cool one to make as well. Actually, I really enjoyed doing both of those. And now there's something else in the pipeline, which is coming out extremely shortly, actually.
That's exciting because you said you have tons of ideas.
I have a lot of ideas.
Wow.
The room I'm in right now is kind of my creative dental room. You can't see it, but around me there is boxes and boxes of materials and lights and experiments that I do. This is where I dissolve teeth and cut teeth apart, and very sad facts to admit online to the world. But if you can make dentistry also like a hobby, it becomes more fulfilling, to a limit for sure.
Yeah.
It's always important to do stuff outside of it, but just to clarify that point too. But yeah, there's something coming out in the summer which we've been working on for a while, which I think is going to be really awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to
I'll
it.
send you it. Right?
Wow.
It's ready.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I just see the obsessiveness.
Yeah.
And I love it. I feel like you need that degree of obsession to really dive in deep into it and become a master.
It can be helpful in the early years, having that obsession, just because you're all kind of on that even playing field and you can really catalyze everything in a very short period of time. I see it happen before my eyes time and time again. People that maybe go just like a little bit above and beyond in those kind of early years will quickly often separate and create a little kind of distance. Either you can kind of keep going with that, or everyone needs a break at some point in time. But it's much easier to do it, I think, early on than wait 10, 15 years and then try and find that little bit that excites you in dentistry. You want to try and find the passion early on and then really go for it, because I think you'll actually be surprised how easy it actually might come, because so few people actually take action. Like they might all love one certain area, but they won't actually act on it that much. Your competition, as it were, is probably a handful of people. It's not what you might think.
Wow.
That's my experience, at least.
Action.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's so good.
I mean, like you now, you've made a podcast. You recently graduated. Now you're dental podcasting, doing your cases, taking the CE, finding out, what excites you. Hopefully aesthetics. And you're a great example of that, I would say.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Because, I graduated in 2019, but I found my passion for cosmetics not too long ago, just around when I was taking your course. And so it's very new passion, but something inside me is every time I do these interviews, and that's how this whole podcast came about, because I'm like, I want to get close to people who's made it to where I want to get to. And I was just so frustrated or stuck in a sense that I could not get that where I am. And I was like, how do I bring this close to me and share that with people? And I think in a way it was just an idea, and I'm like, I need to start it. I didn't really think too much about it. And then once I got into it, it's a lot of work. But every time I speak with one of you successful cosmetic dentists, I'm just coming out of it feeling so inspired, and this is what I want to do, and I want to just continue walking down that path. So I just love that you bring that message of taking action and how important that is, especially in the beginning stages of your career, and probably just ongoing as you level up, because you said there's always a space to get better, and just continuing that momentum. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. This is
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this, by the way.
Aw, thank
I gotta walk
you.
my dogs after this, so
Yeah,
this
I'm
is a little
definitely
bit.
aware of the time, and I'm so, so thankful of your time here and just sharing your pearls and wisdom and journey. Last but not least, I always kind of wrap up my podcast with this question. If you were to go back in time, like 10 years ago, when you just kind of graduated as Dr. Thomas, new grad dentist, what would
Yeah.
you tell yourself?
I can think of something that I shouldn't say,
No,
but
go ahead.
I think I would tell myself that you're right in not trusting what everyone else is telling you to do. I'm so glad that I didn't do what everyone told me to and did my own thing. And even when I started out doing maybe cases like this or sharing things and lectures, that even in those early years when people were still, some people, negative, I'm glad that I kept ignoring them. So I would say just to keep doing what you kind of believe was right at that moment in time, and that it'll all work out. But maybe I was lucky that I kind of had an idea very early on of how I kind of saw things could turn out in the right way.
Yeah.
But that was just that little bit of maybe having direction and finding something that excites me. Anyone can find that, even if it's oral medicine. We all make mistakes. Even if that's someone's passion, then you can really go for it. Or if your passion's working 1 day a week, and with patients and doing other stuff, you can create that, or you can work 6 days a week. Like, dentistry is so malleable. I've gone off topic now, but I really believe that you can make it so fulfilling if you have a little vision of how you want it to be. You can really create that. It's a very unique job in that regard, actually.
Yeah.
You can't do that in a lot of other jobs.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you so much for this time, and
Thank you.
yeah, it was such an honor to have you.
No, thank you for wanting me to come on. I'll be back anytime. I'm free tomorrow. Same time, same place.